It's showtime, gang. Welcome to the Happy Hour webcast from WhiskyCast.com. I'm Mark Gillespie, and we are wrapping up the month of June, halfway through 2021. Hopefully, things are getting better where you are. I'm not 100% sure we're through this yet, but we'll all get through it together sooner or later. I'm hoping it's been a good week for you. Slancha, we're going to have a little bit of fun over the next hour or so. A couple of old friends are joining us on the Happy Hour webcast today, but I teased before we get started. I'm just going to tell you what's in my glass because I teased this thing out a few weeks ago with a photo of a bottle wrapped in bubble wrap and said, can't tell you what it is yet because I'm not allowed to, but I can now tell you that what is in that bottle that was hidden behind bubble wrap that you'll see on social media and what is in my glass. Yep, plug in a sponsor. Dewar's Japanese Smooth. Yep, Mizunara finished oak. 8-year-old blend, just like the Portuguese, the Illegal Smooth, the Portuguese Smooth, and the Caribbean Smooth. And if you've seen pricing for Mizunara oak finished whiskeys, you know that they can be somewhat high. Game changer, kids. $24.99 a bottle in the U.S. is the recommended retail price. So I will have my tasting notes up for that soon at whiskycast.com. And I'm going to unmute our guests here because I did some lip reading when I looked down and I saw what Louise's reaction was when she heard the price point on that. I think the word was wow and something like that. Is that... Louise McGuane, our pal from J.J. Corry Irish Whiskey and Chapelgate Whiskey Company in Ireland, and Alasdair Day from R&B Distillers, a longtime friend of the show, from the Isle of Raasay Distillery on Raasay in Scotland. We are getting a little bit of audio issues here, but we will hopefully get through all that. And the comment from Watchman 999, holy Mizunara, Batman. Yep. That's the fun, guys, of somehow getting the Whiskey Ferry deliveries a little early. I wanted to talk to you guys because, first of all, Isle of Raasay just released what has got to be one of the coolest bottles I've seen in a while. Your inaugural single malt, Alasdair. Tell me about this one. Because there's fossils in this bottle, as you pointed out before we started talking.
So the bottle itself, we've actually modelled on the geology of Raasay, and the actual texture in the glass here is actually the rocks on Raasay. So we took clay, Aileen, our marketing manager, took clay and formed it into the rocks, and then we sent that down to Stranger and Stranger, and we sent some fossils down as well, and they imprinted the fossils in the clay, and then that clay was used to make the mold for the glass. And you can see we've got Isle of Raasay on the side there and some more fossils on the back. And this little fossil here at the bottom, these ridges, this is actually in the wall in the distillery of our gathering room. So we're really keen to talk about the geology, and on the label here you can see we've actually got that. And we've got a well on site, so the well goes 60 metres down below the distillery, and it's all that water's used in the process. So we use it for cooling, we use it for fermentation, and we use it for the cask reduction. We use it for bottling as well. So the same water all the way through the process. It's all matured on Raasay as well. It's bottled on Raasay, so it's all done on site at the distillery.
And our pal Crump, who is now referring to himself as Crump the Cask Hole, says, that's a cool-looking bottle. I'd save it afterwards as an infinity bottle. And I got to admit, it is one of the neater bottles I have seen in a while. So, Louise, let's find out what you've been up to in the last few weeks. I know you had a tasting earlier tonight, and I saw you yawning just now, and that's okay. But tell us what you've been up to.
Oh, wow. We're, it's like we're gearing up for a post-COVID kind of whiskey world. It's sort of a weird thing, and we have some really interesting collaborations kind of on the go. I was lucky enough, look, I'm coming to you live from the Rack House here, and I was lucky enough to actually acquire quite a bit of stock during the last 18 months, like a lot of older kind of malt stocks of Irish whiskey. So what I'm doing at the moment is making a plan for how those are going to make their way in the world. And we have some really interesting sort of guest blender collaborations kind of on the go, actually, which is really, really cool. So yeah, there's a lot of focus on that for the next like 6 months, really.
Sounds like a lot of fun. And you've just reopened to tourists too, right?
Yeah, Ireland.
Somewhat.
The reopen here is, it's weird. Like, we've kind of taken everything off the farm. So last year we kind of opened to tourists on the farm here, and now what we've done is take that off the farm, and we're working with a hotel in Doolin, which is right it's just underneath the Cliffs of Moher, which is one of the most famous places in Ireland. It was the Cliffs of Doom and the Princess Bride, and there's a beautiful hotel there, and they have this big outdoor space called the Meadow, and we've just popped up a little tasting room there for the duration of the summer. It's taking what we do here kind of out in the world, essentially. So yeah, we're doing that as well.
And when is your next release coming out? Because the last release that I got from you guys was The Story, which is the one you did with Barry Chandler and the Stories and Sips folks. When are we going to see something new?
Oh, soon. Like, so I had to, we were crazy on releases last year and the year before. Like, it was just constant sort of really, really tiny, small batch things over and over and over again. And the business, we're growing a bit as a business. So I started to get really kind of concerned about, like, we can't be doing those things constantly. We have to kind of pull back and plan them properly and do them in a bit more kind of a measured way as the business is sort of growing. So you'll be seeing a couple of things for us between the months of like September and December. Really, between the months of September and March, honestly, there'll be a fluttering of new releases. But it just got really frenetic. We were doing like tons and tons of tiny releases, and I loved that. But we had to kind of take stock. COVID throws a lot of pressures at a business, as you can imagine, and particularly a whiskey business. So we had to kind of take stock. And what we're really doing at the moment now, and this is cool, is like pulling back and planning for the next 10 years. So we've never done that before. So we're really pulling back and looking at all the new make that we've got here and figuring out the casking, the cask program for that for the next decade. So a lot of my focus is there at the moment rather than like bang, bang, bang releases. But yeah, like we paused for a while on like crazy new releases, but we're coming back hard.
And comment from Callum Renton for Alasdair. Great to see you getting around this week, spreading the Raasay love. Amazing amount of complexity in such a young whiskey. It's been a while. It took a while for you guys to get Isle of Raasay up and running a few years ago and then get this first whiskey out. For folks who are not familiar with it, give us the backstory, and we'll talk about your origins with the Tweedale Blend later on. Okay,
thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's great to see Callum on as well. So yeah, I mean, so R&B Distillers, which is the company itself, was incorporated in 2014. We started trading 2015. We started with While We Wait. The idea of While We Wait was to talk about Raasay and start showcasing the style of whiskey we wanted to make on Raasay, so lightly peated with dark fruits in simplistic terms. We got our planning permission for the distillery in February 2016. We broke ground in June 2016, and we started distilling in September 2017. So our inaugural release last November was 3 years old, almost exactly 3 years old. And that was, if you like, the link between While We Wait and our single malt, which we've got tonight. And again, it was 2 years in Tennessee whiskey, Jack Daniel's casks, and then it was 1 year in Bordeaux red wine casks. So very similar to the While We Wait, which we finished in Tuscan red wine casks. So that gave us the lightly peated and the dark fruits. But for our actual single malt, we refer to the 6 casks. So it's actually three casks, 3 different wood types. So we do peated and unpeated. We do about 6 months of each. we mature it separately. So we get unpeated and peated, and then you've got the 3 cask types. So you've got our Woodford Reserve Rye cask, which are first fill, and the Bordeaux Red Wine cask, which are first fill, and then you've got the Virgin Chickapin Oak cask, Quercus Muhlenbergy. So not Quercus alba is North American oak, but slightly different from that. It's much sweeter, more mellow, and we use a high char and a high toast in those casks. So you get a lot of colour very early on. In fact, that's some of our Quercus Muhlenbergy casks about 30 months. So you can see the colour in that. And that gives us the kind of dark fruit flavours that we want as well. And then we vat all of that together. So we vat the 6 casks together, and in rough proportions, it's predominantly the rye, then the chickapin, and then the Bordeaux. And the Bordeaux red wine is the kind of top notes. That's what we're floating across the top. So what we're trying to achieve was, as I say, lightly peated with dark fruits, but knowing that we were going to release a 3-year-old whiskey, we knew for it to be good, we want it to be good, we want it to be excellent, and it had to have complexity and depth. And so that's why we did the peated and unpeated separately. That's why we've got the 3 different wood types. So the rye cask is very much the black pepper and the spice. The Muhlenbergies, that kind of mellowness, a bit of sweetness in the black fruits, and then just that wine floating across the top with a bit of that French oak coming in as well. So really, probably after the first couple of years, it gets past the wine and it's into the French oak. So you get much more of the kind of savoury spice from the oak as well. So hopefully we've achieved that. So hopefully we've got our lightly peated and our dark fruits, but we've also got the complexity and the depth. And elegance is a word I use as well, something that's actually approachable and relatively easy to drink. It's not something you have to really work at. So yeah, that's that whirlwind tour of Raasay and how we got to where we are now.
And we had a comment while you were talking from Donner Pass Whiskey. You mentioned the While We Wait bottles, and Donner Pass had one of the 2018s, and not really his thing, but just personal taste. And explain what the While We Waits were, because that was your young spirit that wasn't quite ready yet, right?
Yes, it wasn't actually our spirit. No, it was the While We Wait was actually from another Highland distillery.
Okay.
So we worked with another distillery to produce that. They don't actually have a lightly peated spirit, so we did something very similar. We took their unpeated and their peated, we vatted it together, and then we finished it in the Tuscan red wine cask. And I think, I know where that comment's coming from, because it was a bit more jammy, a bit more of the red wine, whereas in our actual single malt itself, the red wine's just a component, and it's the smaller component. So I think, honestly, you get much better balance the way we're doing it now with the 6 different cask types.
Louise, for the folks who are not familiar with the Gale, which was sort of your flagship, tell us about this one, because this is, as you pointed out, goes back to the traditional days of whiskey bonding, right?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know us, so we're a whiskey bonder here in Ireland, and what that means is that, like, we don't distill, we never will. We rather, our sort of responsibility in terms of spirit comes from after distillation onwards. So it's a really old business model in Irish whiskey that we kind of revived. It was very common in Ireland up until about the 1930s, when the Irish whiskey industry sort of collapsed. And it's a really simple concept. I am effectively responsible for, when I source whiskey from a distillery, from its journey off of the still into your desk. So I kind of tend to call it sort of like shepherding the whiskey from still to glass. So we have a pretty complicated wood program as well. And we have our own maturation warehouse here, which I'm in at the moment on the west coast of Ireland, on our farm. And in the back here, we have a blending room where we can blend anything from literally like a litre up to 10,000 litres of whiskey. So that's what we do. And in Ireland, when we first came out with this, the Gale, which I'm drinking right now, this is a 60-40 malt grain blend. And in Irish, that's normally that ratio is normally flipped. But I wanted to come out with an Irish whiskey that was definably Irish, with a big fruit bomby kind of Irish sort of recognizable palate flavors kind of that you get from Irish. But we use pretty pure stock in here. So the whiskeys in here they tend to be from 2002, 2006. We always have a top dressing of 1991, which we're eventually going to run out of. And then we have a 40% kind of balance of grains, ranging in age depending on the batch from 9, 10, 11, 12 years old grains. So it's a big fruit bomb of an Irish whiskey, precisely the kind of profile that you expect from a traditional kind of Irish whiskey blend, except a bit more elevated. We're on batch 4 of this now. Yeah, we're on batch 4 of this now. And the core of the blend has remained the same. We're still using the 2002, 2006 for the top dressing of 1991. They're on sherry casks in the 1991. But the grain component has started to evolve as we've been bringing through this grain into the blend. So that's our core flagship that's always available. It's always kind of out there, and a lovely evolving kind of story of what it is that we do here and the whiskeys that we can acquire.
Well, I'm still working my way through batch number 1, so I've still got a ways to go on this one. But how has it changed since batch 1?
All that has changed legitimately is the whiskeys have gotten older. So the 2002 has gotten 4 years older, and the 2002 has gotten older. And we have played around. The grain component has evolved a little bit because we've started to bring in some of this kind of younger grain. But we don't do like a consistent, we don't do a bland sort of consistent whiskey. Like we're too small for that. So the Gale always tastes like the Gale. It's just that there's really kind of subtle nuances in it every time we do a new batch, because the cask selection that we have changes and the vintages of them change, but it always tastes like the Gale. And they're pretty subtle differences, and that's because we work really hard, like really, really hard to try to get that level of consistency going and keep it fairly kind of standardized, essentially. So, but there's still those nuances that I think are quite nice, We don't have a whiskey in our portfolio yet that is always going to taste the same every year. I think it's way, way, way bigger to be able to do that, and have way, 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 way more stock. So there's nuances and changes. And for me, this one that I'm drinking, the batch 4, it's kind of like, we always describe it as a grown-up version of the Gale, because everything has just kind of evolved over time and got complex and interesting.
And we have a question from Chris Ratcliffe for you now, Alasdair. Just looking on the map, Raasay seems like an odd choice to set up a distillery. Why did you guys pick it, since you built the first legal distillery ever on that island? And how much is actually done on the island, and how much do you have to have done on the mainland?
Yeah, some good questions there. Yeah, so Isle of Raasay is just off the east coast of Skye, so effectively we're an island off an island. We're really not that far from Talisker. We're probably about 10 miles as the crow flies. They're 57 degrees north, we're 57.5 degrees north, so it gives you an idea how close we are. Also, you've got Torreveg on Skye now. So Raasay's actually got a history of illicit distilling, illegal distilling, however you want to phrase it. There's a couple of sites on the island that you can go to, and you'll see where the stills were. And there's some nice stories, like when the excise guys used to come over, they put their whitewashing out on Skye, and the stills miraculously disappeared. So there's a bit of a heritage there. There's also barley grown up on Skye and in Applecross as well, and it was bear barley. And we've done some barley trials on Raasay. We've grown our own barley, just small amounts, for 3 years, and we've harvested it. We've made spirit out of 2 years. We're just about to make spirit from the 2019 harvest, and beer, unsurprisingly, grows well on Raasay, and it ripens. Commercial varieties don't. We're quite wet, as you can imagine, on Raasay, so we've got a very short growing season, kind of May till August. That's about it. So beer works in that. We've also grown Ischia, and Braga. So Esquires from Iceland and Braga's from Norway. They both grow inside the Arctic Circle, so very short growing seasons. So that kind of works. The geology of Raasay, as I say, where it is, we've got some of the best views of Skye. Skye's a beautiful island, but when you're on Raasay looking back on it, it's pretty amazing. In fact, there you go. There's a view of our still house looking out to Skye, so you can see the
nice.
Egg and the pool in there. So that's another reason why it's there. The water, the fact that there wasn't another distillery there. The connection actually came through Bill, so our sole investor, chairman, Bill Dobby, my business partner, his oldest friend from school, Ian Hector Ross. Ian's wife, Marion, family is from Raasay. So when Bill and I met and we were talking about building a distillery, Bill said, "Oh, there's this disused hotel, Isle of Raasay Hotel, available, and I'm thinking of turning it into distillery." So I went up to Raasay in May 2014. We stood outside Borerdale House, which was definitely derelict and empty. I mean, can we turn this into distillery? And we were really looking at that view and just thinking about it. And there's a really good ferry service. It's almost hourly and it's 25 minutes, and you see, there's a bridge to Skye now, so it's actually quite easy to get to. And in terms of what do we have to get done on the mainland, very little. We use 100% Scottish barley. We're currently working with Boort malt. We started off with Beards. We work with Crisp as well. So it's all Scottish barley. It's all malted with Highland peat. So the peated element is all Highland peat that comes in about 48, 52 parts per million. But then, as I say, we're doing unpeated and peated and vatting it together. So that's how we get lightly peated. So that's the only thing, that and the yeast. So we use distiller's yeast. We've used some champagne yeast. That comes in. And if you like, the dry goods for bottling comes in. But everything else. So as I say, we use our own water all the way through the process. We've grown some of our own barley as well, and we're going to have special releases in the future from that. So it's all distilled, all fermented and distilled in Raasay. We've got our own warehouses. So we've just built 2 new warehouses on Raasay. They're about a mile from the distillery, just in the village in Irish. We've got a dunnage warehouse. We've got palletised warehouse. We've got enough room to put in a racked warehouse in the future. So it's all matured on Raasay, and it's all bottled on Raasay as well. So our original warehouse, just behind the distillery, where we did all our maturation for 2 years before moving that down to the new warehouses. That's now all being converted into our bottling hall. We've got 3 vatting tanks, so it's 3 20,000 litre vatting tanks, with one for peated, one for unpeated, and one for gin as well, because we've got our Isle of Raasay gin too. So it's, yes, and if you order from us online, it's actually packaged up and sent off from Raasay as well. So really, everything's matured, bottled on the island, and doesn't leave until hopefully it's sold. So,
how many jobs did you create, and are you now the biggest business on the island?
Yeah, so there's 2 main employers on the island. There's ourselves, so we employ 20 people. We're getting towards 30 now that we've started tours and opened our accommodation again. All of our staff live on Raasay. We've got 1 person who commutes from Skye. That's Aileen, our marketing manager. So we're really, really very fortunate in that we've literally got everyone from the island. We've had people come back. So Callum Gillis, who does our photography and videos and content for our social media, he was working in Orkney. He came back to work as a tour guide, and he's born and bred Raasay, so he's come back to work on the island. Norman Gillis, our operations director, again, he was away. He'd been offshore in the oil at Glasgow Uni as well, and he came back. And Norman actually started as a subcontractor on the groundworks when we were building the distillery, and is now our operations director. So again, yeah, it's great to have that kind of community. And as I say, 20, 30 jobs. At the last census, there was 161 people lived on Raasay. So we're doing pretty well in terms of providing jobs for the community. Yeah.
That is really great. I mean, I know on Isla, for instance, Brooke Laddie's the largest employer, and as Donner Pass points out, it's always nice to hear about all in-house production, as it seems to be the best to help employ more people in remote areas. And I know, Louise, that's what you do out in Western Ireland, out in County Clare. You do everything on site too, right?
Yeah, we have twice the population of Raasay. We have about 280 people in the parish of Corry Clare. And so very, very small rural Irish community, really tiny. Yeah, we do everything here. And one of the reasons is like, I was one of the initial kind of people who came back into the industry, one of the independent companies. There's lots of us now, hopefully, have come into the Irish whiskey industry. And there really wasn't an infrastructure for things like bottling or vatting or anything else really on the island. So I realized that pretty quickly, and I made everything in-house, and that has created jobs. We people around here are farmers. It's an agricultural community, or else they leave. There's not a huge amount of options. So we have created jobs in production and in tourism and in marketing and all the rest of it. And people, and I'm sure you find this on Raasay as well, like people really feel ownership locally of what we're doing here. And they're very proud that, no more than yourselves, like we're sending bottles from here to Hong Kong, Singapore, America, like all over the world, like literally from here, from a tiny little facility. So it's a lovely thing to be able to kind of be a part of a community and add value to it as well.
Well, let's start some trouble because Louise basically threw some gasoline on the fire on social media this week with some of your comments about people who buy whiskey casks theoretically as investments, things like that. And since both Blair Bowman, Andy, and Buxton wrote this week online about the investment market, and I hate that word when it comes to whiskey, how is it affecting independent bottlers and what reaches drinkers? And I know, Alasdair, you had some experience with this doing the Tweedale Blend earlier and sourcing whiskeys for that. So how does this whole investment, cask flipping, people taking a chance on buying a cask of whiskey they think is going to be stunning, how is this affecting the market?
I'll tell you how I know it affects the Irish market. And I think the Scotch market actually is very different, right? So I have a whiskey business, right? And I am in effect investing in whiskey. So if I buy this cask here, or the bulk contents of that cask, I'm investing in that probably for a 10-year return, right? And it's built into my business model that I'm going to buy it for this amount, and if I do my job correctly, I will be able to sell it for that amount by the bottle. And there's a huge amount of work that goes on in between. And I have an inordinate amount of licenses and legal authority to do precisely that, right? And it's really hard to do that. There's a massive barrier to entry to buying and selling whiskey. And what's gone on in the industry, and I don't really, it's weird. I don't know why this has happened. It's just like, it's a sexy thing now. Whiskey, it's fun. It's really, first of all, it's really fun to be involved in the whiskey industry because it's whiskey and it tastes great and you have amazing stories from people who make it, and it's really cool. So people are starting to pile in, and you're starting to see, you're just starting to see on the consumer end, not the business end. Like I know exactly what I'm going to pay for whiskey so that I can sell it later on, and and keep my business running. That's different. What concerns me is that on the consumer level is that people are being sold, a cask of 200 liters of new make whiskey from a bulk distillery that is pumping out 1 million liters of whiskey a year, plus, 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 and they're being told that it's going to be worth increase in value and by 500% in 3 years. And it won't. Like if I do that, that might happen because maybe I will throw $250,000 of marketing investment at it and be able to sell it at some point for 500%, but probably not. But if you're an individual, if you're a human being who likes whiskey and you're buying a cask and you think you're going to get a 500% return in 3 years' time, it's not going to happen in anything. It's not going to happen in pork bellies, and it's not going to happen in property, and it's not going to happen in any of the fashionable investment things we've been told are interesting. Whiskey is just being lumped in with fashionable things to invest in with unrealistic and unobtainable returns. And I'm not concerned for my business because when I have consumers, like individual human beings coming to me saying, I paid 5,000 euros 3 years ago for this cask. I now want to sell it to you for 10. I will say to them, good luck, my friend. I could buy that tomorrow for, 800 euros, whatever. Like you've been told, you've been sold a lie. If you can find another willing individual who will buy that off you, good luck. But it's not actually worth that much. So I'm not concerned for the industry, right? Because we trade whiskey and we know exactly what the value of it is. I'm concerned for people, individual people, consumers who really like whiskey and they kind of want to get involved in the investment of it. And they don't understand the complexities of the whiskey market and the legalities, related to it. And the fact that there are a lot of people out there lying to them about the value of what they're purchasing.
I think a number of my colleagues in the media will write stories on this as the next big investment thing. And I get news releases and pitches from PR folks all the time going, hey, you want to write about our new cask sales scheme? No, because all you have to do is look at Australia and look what happened at Nant Distillery to see what can happen when these things go south. And if you think that your whiskey club can pick a single cask of whiskey and have it turn out to be a great investment 5-10 years down the line, you're delusional. Don't invest in a cask of whiskey unless you're prepared to drink 40 bottles of that thing for the rest of your life, because by the time you and your club mates wind up splitting 250 bottles or whatever comes out of that cask, you're not going to have a market for it. You can't sell it legally in most places. You can't give it away practically because all your friends are already in the club and have their bottles. So you're going to have 40 bottles of something that you're going to be drinking for the rest of your life, whether it's good or not. Is that fair to say, or am I off on this?
Yeah, it's 100% fair. And I think, and sorry, I just want to caveat this by saying that you are 100% correct. Like I am 100% for the idea and agree that it's a brilliant thing to invest in an actual distillery that you can go and visit and meet the people from and support, right? So I can list tomorrow 15 distilleries in Ireland that I would recommend that you go directly to and buy a cask from, right? They will sell you a cask for a reasonable amount of money. And in 10 or 15 or 5 years' time, you'll get a load of whiskey out of that cask. It'll be great fun, and you'll have a nice time, right? You might make a bit of money, you might not, but you'll have a lot of whiskey, and it'll be a very nice thing. It's a great idea as an individual to invest in casks for the love of whiskey and the love of what you're doing. You have to get very, very, very lucky, or buy €1 million or $1 million worth of whiskey to get the 582% return nonsense that is spoken about. So people don't tend to understand the regulatory issues around whiskey on a country by country and very often state by state basis in the United States. Like the tax and the excise and all that stuff is really, really complicated. So I agree with you, Mark. And
go ahead, Alasdair. You were about to say something.
I was just going to say, just for transparency and honesty, we sell casks. We do private cask sales, and we don't sell it as an investment. we sell it to individuals who want to own a cask of our new make. The agreement is we'll store it for 10 years, and the agreement is that we'll bottle it for them. We outline what the duty and taxes currently are and what our bottling costs currently are. We point out that in 10 years' time, they might be very different. So that at an absolute minimum doubles the cost that we charge for a cask. You can double that by the time it gets to bottling in 10 years' time, provided duty and tax doesn't change. We point out that you're going to get 250 bottles, maybe more out of a cask. We're bottling it, and you take it away. We want to protect our own brand, so we're not, we don't sell casks and let them go out of our warehouse. We're going to bottle them all at the end of the day. So, I think you're right. I think it's for people who want bottles of whiskey in 10 years' time. It's not for any other reason. It's not an investment. It's a bit like, and you mentioned flipping. That's another thing altogether. I mean, we as a new distillery have found it very difficult, and it sounds a strange thing to say, because on one hand, our inaugural release sold out. We were selling those bottles at £99, and they were selling at auction at £450. And you're like, that's not us. We don't necessarily want that associated with the brand. Our retail, we thought, for our very first release from the distillery was okay at £99, but £450 at auction, I mean, it's just not. And then when we did this bottling, we put 3,000. So this bottling is about 26 plus, batting, that's going to be about 26,000 bottles. So we put 3,000 into a ballot so that people who wanted to get a bottle up front, we made it very clear how many bottles this vast is going to be. It's going to be over 26,000 bottles. It's been allocated to all of our partners, whether they're retail partners in the UK or importers in Germany, France, around the world. We made it very clear that it's that volume and even with the ballot, we had to go through and literally manually filter some very obvious that were never going to be, there weren't people who were going to buy a bottle and drink it, let's put it that way. So it takes a lot of time to do it, to try and be fair, to make sure that people get a bottle at, this is £48 in the UK. And again, unfortunately, it's at auction for £100. And that's with us doing everything we can to try and make it fair and try and filter out all the obvious people that we don't want to sell it to, shall we say. So, yeah, I think there's
you can say the word if you want to. It sort of rhymes with, massholes. You can say that if you want to. I am flabbergasted by what people send me pictures and what I see when I go to a retail store of what some of these bottles that, as you point out, people are selling yours already on auction for double the sticker price. And I go in and see bottles that were priced at $80 to $90 that are on a retail shelf for $600 or more. And I'm going, I hope you guys can sleep at night, because go ahead. Not a horrible thing, but this is as a producer, right? And this happened to us as well. Like we do a lot of small releases and we became very collectible there a couple of years ago in a moment in time. And it's like you guys, like I remember when it happened, I was like, okay, there's going to be 200 bottles of this and we're going to release it in County Clare and you have to get it. And the bottle was €60 on shelf. And I would have all these people calling me and emailing me and saying, please, can you help me to get this? I can't get one. And I would literally call, because I can't sell direct. I'd call my local retailer and Mary, at Falls. And I would say, Mary, can you please hold the bottle for John O'Connell? John has called me and he's emailed me and he needs 2 bottles. Please hold it for him. And then I would go on Facebook the next day and John O'Connell was selling that bottle for 4 times what the retail cost was. And you have to understand, I didn't get the retail cost.
I sold it at wholesale to Mary, who put it on retail, and we became very collectible, and it was awful. Like, it was awful to see people complaining about the price of my whiskey that I hadn't set. You know, I set the price at 60 or 40 euros, and it's going online for 100 or 200, and we're getting blamed for it. And it's like, my friend, I didn't do that. The collectability thing is really tough when you're a new producer, because you can't control it. And when you're a new producer, all you want to do is make sure that, like, you're making as many people happy as you can. And when, to your point, we've had whiskey that we've sold in that has ended up from the customer going into auctions at $500 euros that should have been 80, you know, and we get a lot of flack from it, and it's really, really difficult. So the flipping thing is tough going as a producer, I would say. Like, and I think you'd agree, like, it's nice to watch happen.
I love this comment from Chris Ratcliffe, who's talking to Bill Ricker. The experience going to a distillery as a VIP and picking a barrel is fun. Following a cask as it ages through samples is fun, and that has value too. If you're going to invest in a cask, you're investing in the story behind that cask. And when you pour that bottle for friends years later, you can say, yeah, we picked this cask like 10 years ago. We got samples of it every year. We went to the distillery. We hugged on the cask. We rubbed it a little bit for good luck and stuff like that, so it would age well and things like that. We put good luck charms on it, and the whiskey came out good, and that's what you're drinking tonight. That's a story that has investment value, I think, because you've got a story you'll be the only one who can tell that story. But in terms of trying to make money off of a cask of whiskey, unless you're doing like Louise does and buying boatloads of casks and trading them and bonding them, blending them, bottling them, my take is the only safe way to make money in whiskey is to buy shares of publicly traded whiskey and spirits companies, because there's a legal market for them worldwide. You can always find a buyer, and it's transparent because they have to publish their finances. And that's the only safe way to do it, as far as I'm concerned. And that's not investment advice. That's just cold, hard facts, gang. As David Brody said, just say what you're thinking, Alasdair. We're all on the same side here. I like that comment. Let's see here. Crump points out, things are only worth what someone is willing to pay. If the whiskey community would quit with our fear of missing out, the prices would come back down. Maybe. Prices don't always come back down.
Yeah, it's the weird thing is that, like, the market, the market dictates, you know, what stuff is worth, you know, and that's what this whole cask investment thing is. People are willing, no matter what they hear, like no matter what they're told or what they read, they're still willing to pay a lot of money for casks that they haven't seen. My advice, to building on yours, Mark, in terms of safely investing in a cask, is go to a distillery or talk to a distillery like Raasay and get a photo of the cask. Get somebody to WhatsApp you and show you, here's the cask that you're buying, and here is the transparency on the tax, etc., etc. Like, I don't know why anybody would invest in the concept of a cask without seeing it. Like, it's an actual tangible asset that evolves over time. It changes over time. It dilutes not dilutes, but it decreases over time, etc., etc. So whiskey is not an asset class that you can buy and sell quickly, like I don't know, property or lumber. Like, you know, like you can't. Like, it's a living, evolving thing. Like, I just noticed this cask has a leak in it, for example, right? So that one. Where is it? If you had invested in that cask, in 30 years, it'll all be gone, right? So, yep. You know, it's a really, that's why whiskey is an asset class in terms of lumping it into stuff like blockchain and NFT and all that stuff is a terrible idea, because it's not a static asset. It evolves and changes over time. Like, that cask might taste diabolical in 10 years, or it might be brilliant. And that's going to affect the value. So, yeah, investing in a cask is go to Raasay, talk to Raasay and be like, invest in a cask there and have a nice time with it and enjoy it at the end. And maybe you'll be able to auction a bottle in 20 years for a crazy amount of money, but don't count on that.
Or you can donate those bottles to charity for auctions and then take the write-off on your taxes.
Yeah.
Think about it that way. But at least if you buy a cask of whiskey, it's better than an NFT, which I'm still trying to figure out what you get when you buy an NFT, other than a picture of something.
Yeah, so an NFT is the only reason I'm pontificating in this is that I spent a lot of time. Yeah, it's a non-fungible token, which is a made-up name for a binary sequence. So I can email you, Mark, I'm going to sell you that cask, which is leaking, by the way, probably be gone in 20 years. I'm selling you that cask now, and I'm going to send you a non-fungible token, which is a series of zeros and ones that's unique to you. And now you own that cask. And you are free now in the weird blockchain cryptocurrency market to sell that on to somebody else. And that's as far as I can get down the rabbit hole on that, because it makes no sense. And
all I see when I see NFTs are blurred out pictures of bottles and casks. I'm going, you're basically buying a picture of a whiskey. You're playing fantasy whiskey here.
You're pretending to own a whiskey cask. You're pretending that you own this. And if you come back in 30 years and you say, I have this NFT here, this non-fungible token, I want to reclaim it for my whiskey cask. How are you going to do that? You're like, it's not a thing. I think I had a conversation with somebody this week about it who was right. And they said, lumping in whiskey investment into that fashionable blockchain NFT cryptocurrency world is just a way of making it a bit more relevant to people, because me giving you an NFT is the same as me giving you a certificate for this cask and saying, here's a certificate for this cask and I'm going to mail it to you. And you own this cask, and if you want to sell it, you have to sell the certificate to somebody else, etc., etc. The blockchain is the Excel spreadsheet that I have on my computer. Like it just doesn't work at all. And I just think lumping whiskey investment into these fashionable kind of cryptocurrency things is just getting younger people to invest in it because it's kind of fun and interesting and stuff like that. But again, if you want to invest in a whiskey cask, go to Raasay and say to them, how's it going? Can I invest in this cask? That's how you do it. Like, it's an old school industry in that regard, and it should remain that way because it's a movable, tangible asset.
Now, Chris Ratcliffe has pointed out, and Chris did a story for us on blockchain a few weeks ago. He says NFT is a way of marking an electronic document as unique and unaltered. I thought that was blockchain. And so maybe I'm completely wrong in being a Luddite here, but I like what Bill Ricker says. What do you get when you buy an NFT? Taken.
Shafted.
Yeah. So, yep. I'm going, wait a second. There are plenty of ways for people to be separated from their money that some might actually make sense. And I'm looking at NFTs and I'm going, oh, hell no. Cryptocurrency? No, I don't want to be paid in cryptocurrency because I don't want my income to be subject to the free market and not the regulated government currency markets and the regulated area where I know what a dollar means, and we all know what a dollar or a British pound or an Irish euro means when we're trading it for something. Whereas Bitcoin can mean whatever the hell someone wants it to at the same time here. Let's get back to whiskey instead of finance and stupid stuff. Graham Fraser, and we covered a little bit of this earlier, but I'd love for both of you just to sort of repeat what your next whiskey releases are going to be over the course of the next few months that you can talk about. And you hinted at some of these earlier, both of you. And Alasdair, let's start with you.
Yeah, so we've just put our signature malt out there. As you know, we've got another vatting of that coming up. Yeah, and hopefully we'll be vatting that in August, and getting it out bottled and out there. So that's literally another vatting of our signature malt. So it's the same 6 casks, unpeated and peated. The ratio will be slightly different, so the parts per million in the bottle will be slightly different. This, by the way, is about 4.5 parts per million in the actual bottle. So although our barley is coming in at 48.52, by the time we've vatted it's in the bottle, it's about 4.5. So that's lightly peated. Our inaugural release was about 13 parts per million. So I would think the next vatting is going to be kind of in the 10 to 12, that kind of region. So still lightly peated, but just that variation from batch production, just similar to what Louise was talking about. And then in October, we've got a special release coming out. So slightly different from our 6 casks. It's been, let me get this right, it's been 2 years in our rye casks. And then we re-racked it into Oloroso and PX quarter casks. So it'll have a year in the quarter casks. Sampling that last week, and it's coming along nicely. And it's going to be just slightly different again. So you'll have that kind of peated butterscotch, slight vanilla from the American oak and from the kind of black spice from the rye. And then obviously the Oloroso and the PX as well. So that's us for the rest of this year. We've got we're going to do some single cask bottling. So the 3 different wood types that are in our signature malt with the 6 casks, so the 3 wood types, we're going to do some single cask bottlings of those sort of through the rest of this year. Probably distillery only releases, maybe online. So very, very small batches. And at our virtual launch for the signature malt, we did a poll, and it was pretty close. It was pretty close between the Checopin and the Bordeaux red wine cask. We asked everyone to pick which we should bottle first, and it was actually, believe it or not, the Bordeaux red wine cask that won it by 1 vote. So that's the cask that we'll be bottling first. So yeah, keep an eye out for all of these releases coming up.
Was that your vote? Because your vote is the one that counts, right?
I honestly didn't vote in that particular poll. So.
Louise, what are you working on right now for your first release? You said you might have something in September.
Yeah, we have literally, as we speak, we're on the next batches of Gale and Hansen. So these are our kind of workhorses. They're in the portfolio the whole time. So we're on to the next batches of that. And then we have a single malt called the Flintlock that we bottle it pretty much once a year. It's only 4 casks that tend to go into it. This year it's going to be 2002 malts. So we picked 4 different casks and we bought that. So that single malt's coming in again between kind of like September and December. And we have a special bottling coming in for there's, I can't say too much about it, but there's a big customer in the USA that we're working on a special beer finish with. They have like a microbrewery, and we're working on a beer finish with those guys over there. And we're not going to release it, but we have a bunch of these 30-year-old casks, these 30-year-old sherry casks. Last year we did a release of 120 bottles of that, 29-year-old. We call it batting. Last year it was called batting number 1 or 2. This year it will be called the batting number 3 and 4. And we're doing that. And then we do have like an insane project. But
your audio is breaking up just a little bit, Louise.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty quiet in here. I don't know like what it is, but like I think we have a really interesting bottling coming up in conjunction with a friend of mine that I can't talk about. So we basically have 4 different releases coming up between now and December. So yeah, watch this space.
Quick question for you from Greg Serafian, our friend in Paris. Do you have a French distributor, Louise? Because he can't find your whiskeys there, or at least they're very scarce.
Yeah, we do have a French distributor, but they haven't hit like Paris yet necessarily. So we're making our way kind of around the country. We launched there last year during pandemic, and it's mostly off premise, but yeah, we are available. It's up on our website kind of where we're available in France, but it's moving. It's starting to move in France. Yes.
Alasdair, I want to go back to when we first met years ago at the I think it was at the Scotch Whiskey Experience in Edinburgh, when you had just released the first batch of the Tweedale Blend. That, correct me if I'm wrong, it was your great-great-grandfather, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you can. It's reflecting too much.
I recognize that one. I have not. I still have the somewhere around here, and I was trying to find it. It's back on one of the shelves behind me, but I could not find the original Tweedale Blend bottle from 10 years or so ago.
Yeah, I've got one in the cupboard behind me. I'll get it out in a sec. But this is our current one. So this is the 28-year-old Tweedale Blend. I'm just trying to show you at the back of the bottle is a picture of my great-grandfather. So Richard Day. So the original company that produced the Tweedale was J&A Davison. They were established in 1820 in Coldstream. They were licensed grocers. They had the Coldstream Brewery, and then they had the licensed grocer shop in Duke Street, Whiskey Blenders. My great-grandfather joined that business in 1895 as an office boy. He took over the business in 1923, and unfortunately for me, he retired after the Second World War, and that was the end of the business. But fortunately, through the family, I inherited this. This is the family cellar book, and it's actually a sales ledger. So it's all the sales from 1881 to 1882. And then, more interestingly, at the back of the book, it has all the blends, the recipes for all the blends that the company produced from 1899 to 1916. So I used the recipe in this book. So back in 2009, 2010, I basically used the book to recreate the Tweedale, and we've got some other things. This is actually the tissue paper that my great-grandfather used to wrap the bottles in. There are some original bottles in the Coldstream Museum still. Unfortunately, they're empty, but you can see that I basically used that tissue paper, the fonts on there, to recreate the label, so you can see exactly where that came from. So yeah, so that's really my connection with whiskey. So I can trace it all the way back to 1820, and the shop, J&A Davis' original shop in Coldstream, is still there. It's a house now, and the owners of the house contacted me and said they wanted to restore the original. If you like, it had the name above the door, as all licensed grocers did. So that's actually, I sent them some photographs of the original business, and they've actually returned it. So I was down there. If you look at my Instagram feed, you'll see the picture of down there, and it was great to see the building back to J&A Davison, established 1820. So yeah, so that's kind of my heritage. The Tweedale's still going, as I'm saying. In fact, let me, I'll just grab a bottle of the original. There you go. That's the original batch one. Yep. Tweedale.
That's the one I have around here somewhere.
Hanging on to the last little drop there. But yeah, that was 10 years old.
As am I.
So the recipe for the Tweedale, it's 8 malts and 1 grain whiskey, and it's about 50-50 grain to malt. The malts are Lowland, Highlands, Speyside, and 1 Islay whiskey. The Islay only makes up 2% of the blend. So that's the kind of outline of the recipe. And you were talking earlier about when difficulty in getting casks. So when I started back in 2009, I bought all of the casks matured. So I wasn't buying new make and aging them on. I was literally buying the casks I bought for that first blend were 10 to 21 years old. And by 2012, 2 years later, it was almost impossible to get 10 to 16-year-old whiskey. So that was about the same time that Macallan 10 went to Macallan Gold. You know, it was just really, really, really difficult to get. So it was getting harder and harder to produce the blend, harder and harder to get good quality casks and good whiskey. I mean, just in that matter of 2 years, the whole market just closed down for getting casks. So it did me a favour in a way, because I sat down and did the sums of what I would need in investment to buy a new make. And once I had worked that out, I realised that in actual fact, I could build a small distillery for that amount of investment. And that's where Raasay came from in a roundabout sort of way. So there you go.
The story behind that with the licensed grocers sounds a lot like the origin story behind J.J. Corry, Louise. I know that J.J. Corry was a licensed grocer, right?
Yeah. So same thing. Like, they had them in Scotland, they had them in Ireland. Johnny Walker was one. That's how he started. Like, pre everything else. Like, that was his kind of origin story. And it's
so was the Shivas brothers.
Yeah, like, and so we have, I don't have it with me, but like, we have, similar to you, I don't have the blending book, unfortunately, but I do have the wrapping paper and the bits and pieces. And that, like, literally, J.J. Corry was founded in the early 1890s, and he shut down in about 1930. And that was it. That was a very similar story. They call themselves whiskey bonders here in Ireland, and that's what they were licensed as, and that's what was above their door legally. That's what they were called. But yeah, it was a very kind of traditional piece of the industry that was around, and it was a blend of a multitude of whiskeys from a multitude of distilleries that were local to them. You know, it wasn't an issue going out and getting whiskey from here, there, and everywhere to sort of blend. So yeah, there's real echoes, all right, of that in Irish and.
Didn't you actually, though, find a bunch of the original J.J. Corry documents in a garage sale or something?
It was an antique dealer whose name is Davok Rin, great guy who lives with me. And when I came home to Ireland, I was going to set up a distillery initially, and I started to do a lot of research into, you know, the heritage of whiskey locally, and I mean in County Clare. And I discovered various distilleries that had existed over time, and J.J. Corry. And J.J. Corry, the way that I discovered it was there was a local antique dealer who had, in 1983, been asked to dismantle the J.J. Corry shop. And the J.J. Corry shop had been operated by J.J. Corry's daughter, Bridie, from the 1950s until her death in 1983. And prior to that, it had been operated by J.J. Corry and his wife. And she hadn't changed anything in the shop. So there was all this like archival information, wrapping paper, receipts, ledgers, telegrams, et cetera, that was in the shop. This antique dealer cleared it out. He sold the interiors of the shop to a local folk park. So you can actually visit the original J.J. Corry interiors in County Clare if you ever come here. And he kept all this paper ephemera, and he was selling it off at $5 a label on eBay for years. I literally found it on eBay, and I called him up, and I was like, I went to his house and I said, I'll buy all of this, or as much as I can. I want this because I think it's an important part of what I'm trying to do here. And I once I discovered that, I was like, that's what we're going to do. We don't need a grain to glass distillery per se. We're going to bring back this old brand and the way that they created whiskey. So yeah, there's really good correlations there between Scotch and Scottish whiskey and Irish whiskey, in that, you know, they were similar at the time because they were both governed by the crown back in those days, and they had similar ways of working.
Hey, I got to ask, first of all, how's your foot? Because I haven't talked to you since you had that run-in with your horse a few months ago.
Fine. I'm back on the horse. My foot's fine. Thank you for asking.
And Ruby, the dog, is fine too, right?
So all the dogs and all the horses are fine. We now have, before lockdown, I had one dog, and now we're not even post-lockdown, but like now I have a massive horse, a miniature horse, Ruby the dog, and a collie dog who's a rescue. I have this huge menagerie. So if you ever come here to visit us, you will meet all of the dogs and horses.
I'm looking forward to that because some folks have pointed out that you can hear Bader barking upstairs, and this is National Take Your Dog to Work Day. I saw our pal Billy Layton from Redbreast. I guess it's International Take Your Dog to Work Day because Billy posted a photo of himself and Gizmo, his dog, sitting at the blending table, and we all know it's Gizmo that does the real work of blending, and Billy just gets all the credit as the humans do, but...
We've all known that in Irish whiskey world for a long time. I'm glad that it's being passed on.
We tease, of course. Alasdair, one final question for you from Graham Fraser. You pointed out that you're not letting casks get out, but are you selling any of your new make for blending yet?
No, we haven't. So we haven't sold any of our spirit or casks to trade, with a couple of exceptions. So we're working with Scotch Malt Whisky Society, and we're working with Berry Brothers. So there will be some independent bottling in the future. But in terms of if you like brokerage or selling to trade, no, we haven't.
Okay. Well, we're going to let you guys go because it's late over there. It's after 11 o'clock your time, and we've wasted as much of our audience's time tonight as I think we can get away with legitimately. So thank you for joining us tonight, both of you. Alasdair Day from R&B Distillers, the Isle of Raasay Distillery. You'll see the Raasay single malt in various markets around the world. Louise McGuane from Chapel Gate Whiskey Company. This is the Gale. You'll also find the Hanson, Flintlock. What's the mezcal finished one?
Battalion.
Okay, I've got a bottle of that behind me, but I didn't want to turn around and look for it real quickly to figure out to get the name off of it again. And of course, the story, which is now sold out, that was through Barry Chandler's Stories and Sips group. I want to thank you both for joining us tonight, and especially since it's late over there, and I do want to respect your time and let you guys go. So, Louise McGuane, Alasdair Day, thank you for both joining us tonight.
It's a pleasure. And thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
And that does it for this week's Happy Hour Live webcast. We'll be back next Friday night, 5 o'clock Eastern Time, 10 p.m. London Time, 2100 GMT, here on the WhiskyCast YouTube channel, our Facebook page, Twitter, and Twitch. Don't forget to listen to the podcast this weekend. We will have it out on Sunday night. Until then, and until we meet again, I'm Mark Gillespie. Good night, everyone.